Beach ball.
So we're going to go ahead and get our meetings called to order. If we could all stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Get a motion to go into executive session.
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session according to Idaho Code Section S74206. What's that? Oh. B, to consider evaluation, dismissal, or discipline of, or to hear complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, individual agent, or public instance.
Do you want a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Kirsty? Aye. Russ?
Aye.
Kim?
Aye.
We are in executive session. Thank you for being patient with us while we took care of business in executive session. Is there anything in the agenda that needs to be moved? Hearing none, we can move on and start with our celebrations and communications. Superintendent Johnson.
Vice Chairman and Trustees, I have some students to celebrate with you. You may have seen this out and about on some of our social media channels, but we have 4 students that were recognized by the College Board for the National Hispanic Recognition and the National Rural and Small Town Awards. So just wanted to give a shout out to these 4 amazing young people who were recognized from the College Board. And I wish they were here so we could celebrate them tonight, but way to go. I think this is the first time we've had this for ever, I think. Yeah, can't remember this in the past. And then I believe we have some other things. We also received 2 grants from Governor Little's meeting, Idaho. We received almost $69,000 for a new computer lab to expand computer science in our school district, in our high school. And then we received a little over $20,000 for our health occupations pathway for some simulators. As you guys know, this is in addition to the ambulance simulator that we received last year. So, some great things happening, and we should celebrate in our school district. I'll keep going if you would like, Vice Chair.
Yes, please.
As you know, in our school board meetings that we want to acknowledge people who are living what we call the Kuna Way, which is our values that we honor in the school district. And I have some amazing people here to honor. We have in our technology department, Cam, we have our office manager, Brenna, we have Ben, we have Tina, and then we have these 3 amazing people. As you guys probably heard, the day before, the night before, the early morning before school started, our power went out in Kuna Middle School, and these 3 amazing people showed up and made sure we were going to be able to have school on the first day of school in Kuna, and power was returned. So thank them for that. It may have made everybody happy to have school that first day, but it wouldn't have made us happy. And then we have an amazing student who's here tonight that we want to acknowledge. And I'm going to have Assistant Superintendent Becca Dahl talk about this amazing student and give her an award tonight.
So Vice Chair Thomas and members of the board, you've heard us talk about AVID and a lot of the work we've done with AVID. And this summer we had the opportunity to have a couple of AVID trainers come in and do a workshop for all of our teachers. And then we had a day with our administrators. And with the teachers, it was a 2-day workshop, and there was well over 100 teachers there. Now, I don't like to get up and talk to like very many people at all.
Like she's loving this right now.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, but part of AVID is the kids talking. So we are going to be having a showcase. February. So part of that is kids talking about what they do in AVID and what kind of thing, why they're in, why do they like AVID. So Principal Tripp asked one of the students if she would be willing to come and talk to the teachers and the administrators about AVID. And so Sky Lynn, brave Sky Lynn.
I think you should come forward.
Come on up, Sky Lynn.
She's not afraid.
No, she's kidding. Sky Lynn stood up in front of 100 teachers and a bunch of administrators crowding around down in Swamp Falls in the cafeteria, packed in there, talked about AVID, and then said, are there any questions? And took questions from teachers, right, Sky Lynn? her at Ross and answer questions to all the teachers that she didn't even know from other schools, and have all of us administrators surrounding her. So we were just so humbled, I guess, by her braveness and how she talked about Avid and just her peppiness, and it was just so much fun to have her as part of that morning to start us off. So Skyline, thank you so much.
We're proud of you.
We're so proud of you.
I had the amazing opportunity to hear her speak at the Avid Showcase last spring. Do you remember that? Okay. I remember you. Thank you. Thank you guys for being here
Yes.
tonight.
Thank you.
And celebrating her. And then Vice Chairman and trustees for communications to the board, as you know, anytime a patron sends an email to the quorum of the board members, in this case it was to all the trustees, we just posted in our communications just so that it's transparent that it was out there for all of our community to see, because with a quorum of the board, it means a board meeting could happen. So you should see that in your packet. And then a new piece of our communications, and I'd like to thank Vice Chairman Thomas for this, is that, you know, delegations is kind of a weird thing sometimes. You get 3 minutes to talk and the board can't comment because otherwise it would be discussing something that isn't on the agenda, right? And so she asked if I would address anything that came up in past delegations at the next meeting. So at in our August meeting, we had 2 items. One was a parent who spoke about some concerns that her daughter had experienced at the high school. And I saw it happen and then verified it, but in that meeting, Principal Dave Beamer talked to the parent and addressed the concern in the last meeting. And then the second delegate that we had was I want to say 1974 graduate, 1973 graduate of Kuna High School who works for a program called Days for Girls. And she wanted us to provide supplies for young women in our bathrooms, and Ben Gleaton and Terry Reno, who oversees our pantry, they're working on getting free opportunities, free resources, and making them available for our young ladies in our school. So I just wanted to follow up on those 2 things. Thank you.
And if you would like to go ahead and do your superintendent.
I'll just stand up. Yes. And if I might, I will go to the front of the room because I'm sharing a spreadsheet with you. As is my regular report in September, is to provide you with an update on our enrollment. And we saw some interesting things this school year. We did see an increase in enrollment since March. So as you know, every March before spring break, just so we can get ahead of the hiring that happens within the Treasure Valley, we roll all of our students forward, so if they were first graders or second graders, to see how many teachers we need in various grade levels and content areas. And we actually saw, just by moving kids forward and estimating kindergarten enrollment, we saw actually a little bit of a decrease in our enrollment compared to where we were. So we had 5,583 students, and as of the 5th day which is kind of like a point in time for us because enrollment changes all the time, we had just over 5,700, so 5,705 students. So from March to the 5th day of school, which was August 30th, we increased by 138 students. So that was something we expected, that we guessed with some of the work that had been done by the researcher that worked for you, that we would see that with people moving in. But what we didn't expect is that we did not see an increase when we compare 5th day last year to 5th day this year. And so I dug into that and wondered why. And these are just some of the things that I saw in the information. The first one was in the link, if you want to look at that, I'm not going to open it up. But you can see kindergarten enrollment is lower this year compared to last year. And that's always kind of a guessing game anyway. We also saw a little bit of a dip in our 7th and 8th grade enrollment. So that has to do with the numbers, the data. We still see that the high school enrollment continues to increase as we try to manage the growth at those schools. And I'll share in a slide next some of our hot spots still in enrollment. We also know that a new charter opened up just east of Kuna, just right over here, and we had 31 students transfer to that new charter school. This is also a surprise. 251 students moved out of Kuna. Now, it's not 251 families, it's 251 students. So they moved, in some cases, another state, in some cases, another town, but they left Kuna. And that was, we were hearing from our principals, like, we can't believe how many students have moved in my school. Because that hasn't been a typical experience for us the last couple of years. So just, I'm not sure why, but that's happening. And then we had 33 students choose to homeschool this year. So that also doesn't add up to how many students were less compared to 5th and 5th. It just gives you a kind of a sense of some of the bigger numbers within reasons why people moved. And then just to show you, regardless of what happens year to year, the trend line is still showing an increase, right, year to year. You can see since 2000 what our enrollment was, what it is now. Pretty shocking in just 20-some years where we are. And then finally, this is a new chart that I haven't shared with you in the past, primarily because last year we had you all asked a company by the name of Tischler Weiss to do a study for us. The focus was around what would an impact fee look like? Should we actually get treated similar to some of the other city and county organizations that can collect impact fees? And so the person, the company, Tischler Weiss, put together what was called an educational capacity by school. So you can see each school and what their educational capacity is. And part of that has to do with the number of like specialized programs that they serve. And then what they did is they reported the capacity by elementary, middle, and high school. So in the report, which I linked, which is on our website, that's kind of how we put it together. So I'm going to fast forward to last year. So we took the same, we took the actual, compared it to the capacity to kind of come up with like, how are we doing compared to what he predicted, looked into, made his best guess based on with the information around new homes and that sort of thing. So you can see our hotspot, which we knew about, Reed, and we had a little wiggle room still in our high school last year. Fast forward to where we are as of August 30th. We have still similar. Reed is really full, and the high school is really full. Even though it shows that we have capacity, part of that has to do with this, our alternative school. And we can't just send any child there. A student has to qualify because it's an alternative high school. So just another way to look at the information in light of some of our conversations with the city, with patrons in regards to capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a tutoring plan to help our students that Trustee Bruce, Superintendent Jekyll, and Director Gifford are going to tell us about now.
And you have me go first.
Yeah. Why do you tell
I was just, I was gonna click for you.
He's being helpful.
I'm trying to talk, okay. So over the past few months, Wendy always gives updates on, especially at the end of the year, numbers and how students are doing, and the majority of them are always for elementary students. And secondary students don't necessarily have the testing and those kind of resources to show where they are in their learning and how they have been learning. And so something that I'm always bringing up is what about secondary students, because academics are just as important as elementary students. And so some of the things that we had discussed, Wendy and I had a couple of meetings, was tutoring implementation of some sort, whether it's in-person tutoring or online tutoring, which I actually got from another conversation from a different trustee in a different district. And they implement online tutoring, which is a good tool for students to have. So the first thing that we're going to do with secondary is implement the online tutoring to see how that goes. And then in the future, we are going to implement some sort of in-person tutoring just to help teachers with the capacity, because the high school essentially is really crowded, and it's really difficult for teachers to try to help individually 20 kids, especially if 20 kids stay after. You can't really give them individual time, and some kids need that individual learning, because also, unfortunately, we are dealing with COVID students as well, at least 12 or 14 years of COVID students if we look forward. So really making sure that the gaps in the learning are being filled and that they have the proper tools that they need to move forward, and so that every student is successful when they graduate. And then another thing I was talking about was the grading system, which they're actually already working on at the middle school to align with the high school. So that will allow the middle school students to already be prepared when they go into high school, and it's not this surprise and this lack for them to understand how to learn and how to do homework and how to do work in general, because they still are allowed to have a mastery type of program in the high school. The teachers are kind of lenient with allowing students to make up tests within certain semesters and quarters of their teaching, so it's not like it's not there, and just implementing that in the middle school so that they are held accountable for doing their work and turning in work at a certain time, and that implementation. And then working on graduation requirements, there's a couple of things that could be changed that would help the students in the high school when they graduate, and so that would be the other tool moving forward. So that's what we've been working on to help secondary students.
Thanks for
Yes.
explaining why.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I was just making sure I was clicking for you, right?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. So I know that Trustee Bruce was talking about secondary, and Kevin is going to address that a little bit more. But this just came to us a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to thank the board. I think it was in the spring when I came to the board and asked if you would sign an MOU with Eagle Gate College to help us with some nursing intern students and an RN, like a capstone, to do their capstone. Well, in that process, well, actually we'll have 6 LPN students that are going to help us do some screenings within the next 2 weeks. They had to do that in September. And then in the spring, we will have a possible RN capstone student. But within that conversation with these people, they said, hey, do you know that we have free tutoring for some of your kids, and specifically in reading and math? And I said, no, tell me more. So nursing students started right here in their Eagle Gate. They're part of it in Boise. Their new semester just started, and they have a work base out of, let's see, I wanted to make sure I got that right, a federal work study off-campus program. And so the nursing students can apply for that, and it's tutoring in the schools. And it has to be elementary in K-5. We asked, can we do 6th grade? And they said we can't, but we can do K-5. And we said, okay. And so we are working with them right now. They're getting the students that have signed up. They will screen them, and then once we know who they are, our principals will screen them. And we can get possibly 2 to 4 of the nursing students for at least 10 to 20 hours per week. That we can't go more than 20 hours. That's what the federal program says. We can have them up to 20 hours. We could have 4, it could be 10 hours. So there's varieties of how we can do that and how we can spread them out, or what grade level. Once we know how many that we'll get, then we'll work on those details with our elementary principals. But the cool thing about this is that these students we can have the same ones for 3 years in a row, working with my kids. So that was pretty awesome. And they said they've had kind of like, not a lot of school districts, I'm saying this quietly, not a lot of school districts have taken them up on the tutoring, so like, we would love to have you help us with giving it back. So that part of it, to help us at least with some of the elementary, then Kevin's gonna talk about more of the secondary, the online, as Christy declares.
I have a real quick question.
Yeah.
Those 2 to 4 students, is that 10 to 20 hours per nursing student or for the program total?
I think it's for them, for each of them, that they can do 20 hours, or if it's 4, they can each do 10 hours, or whatever, yeah. So I'm excited to see how many we get, and then we'll work with the element, I've worked with Kevin, I've already talked to him about it, and like, we'll get with the principals and say, where do you want them to target?
Do you know what screener they're going to be using then?
So this is 2 different, so the visions, no, okay,
For
so
the
they are,
tutoring, don't they
tutoring?
screen the students to find out?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We
We'll
don't
have to do our
screen-
background
Oh, yeah,
check.
sorry.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes,
Background check?
that,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
that plus what screening tool they're using with the kids also.
I think that's will be what we'll
Both.
talk with.
The elementary principals will most likely direct what work those tutors are doing with their students.
Okay,
Yeah,
and both.
they will,
Based on
they
needs.
direct it, yeah. They'll come and meet with the principals, and the principals will say, this is what we want you to do with this group of kids.
So they're going to set that.
Oh, yeah.
And then you
Absolutely.
screen the people that are coming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
2 screeners?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, well, at the secondary level, during the summer, I had met with a representative from it's tutor.com, but it's through the Princeton Review. So it's a company that's very reputable, it's been around for a long time. I was excited because I've seen a need for the help for tutoring too, especially at home for our parents who don't maybe understand the new terminology, the new math, whatever it is, right? The problem was I wasn't sure where money would come for it, so fortunately, we do have the Meta grant, which we're grateful for. So with this, I've done an initial meeting with them. We don't have it set up and finalized yet. I wanted to get feedback from the board tonight first. With this, you have to pay a $2,500 initial setup fee, and then we buy the hours. We can buy as many as we want. It's $35 per hour. We can make up however many hours we can afford at the time. And then they track it by minute though. So when a student gets on for the tutoring, if it's 15 minutes, we only lose, it deducts 15 minutes of the time we purchased. And then we can always add more hours as it goes. But I felt like this also was a good way to try out the product to see if it is worth keeping. Some of the nice thing about this though, with Princeton Review, they have over 3,500 tutors. They've been vetted. They do their own background check. They test them in the content area that they're going to tutor. They have degrees. They monitor the tutoring sessions, and then the students who receive tutoring give feedback. So there's a lot of things already in place to make sure that we have high quality tutors. It's in over 250 subjects. There's 24-hour access to it in English and in Spanish. Other languages they have as well, but there's only set times depending on what language and the availability of it. So we do have the availability in multiple languages, which is very nice. It's one-to-one. A student, if they've met with a tutor and they like that tutor, they can also pre-arrange ahead of time. So they could have continuity with the same tutor if they really wanted to, or they just, the luck of the draw, whoever's available, depending on what they like. They have an option for voice chat or voice or chat. They can do either way. And then the other nice thing, because it's through the Princeton Review, they get access to other services that aren't live tutors. They get access to the SAT and ACT prep information on their site. They get access to a really cool, it's a writing drop-off. So if I wrote an essay for my class, I can drop it off. Within 12 hours, I get feedback on my writing. Then they have a bunch of tutorial videos on different topics that the students could access. Again, it's not live, but they have access to the whole library of Princeton Review. So there's other things that come with this service. It was interesting when I met with her, she said the most common content requested is Math 1. So I wasn't surprised by that. Let's see, make sure I got it. Oh, and then here's another nice thing. There is a data dashboard for the admin. I don't know if we would set up for just principals. I don't know yet, but it gives them usage data. It also, the tutors have an opportunity to flag students in certain areas where they have concerns, academic areas. So if I'm an administrator, I can go in and see that data and see which kids were flagged for what content areas. So you get some feedback from it as well to help maybe with intervention at the school level, which is kind of exciting. I think that's it. And then, of course, we'll try this out. We'll see how it goes. It may be something that we stick with. It may not be. But our future hope is that push and support work is more than in person. But this gives us a starting point. It gives us something to offer to our students and to parents, quite honestly. That's the one thing I love about it is you access it at home. So I could have used this a few years ago when my kids were in the higher math level and I couldn't remember the math that I'd taken, but I couldn't remember it. So, anyway. Any questions from any trustees?
So I was just trying to figure out how many minutes we get for 2,500.
Well, the 2,500 is just your initial setup.
Oh, so.
That's to get it all set up,
okay.
and then we pay $35 per hour.
Per hour, depending on what we want our students.
Yes.
Or how many.
However many hours we want to purchase, and we
And that
want the
goes to
$20,000. So I don't know how many we'll buy up front, but we then can add more to it if it gets used.
Okay.
They said that the average session is about 20 to 25 minutes, and that about 30% of students, once it's accessible to students, about 30% of the students typically actually access it. So, and they have promotional flyers that we can use. They have tutorial videos for how to use it. So they have that kind of support as well to help at home. So, any other questions?
What was the name of the tutoring?
Tutor.com, but it's through the Princeton Review.
Okay.
Tutor.com sounds totally commercial. I hate the name.
I was just curious. Well, I was just curious too, does the Meta grant only have to go for science, or we can use it for English, whatever we want? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we were able to use it because we were targeting
Math.
improvement. Yeah,
Improvement.
yeah. Math was the concern, I think I
It is the
remember when I
biggest,
met
yeah.
with Trustee Bruce about, but, you know, the writing piece, there was lots of other things that
That you
kids
can
could help
use.
with.
Yeah.
I think it's one.
And again, if we don't like it, we're not committed. There's no contract or
No.
anything like that. So
I think it's a great place to start, and I'm anxious to hear how we use it.
we'll have to update you after we get it up and going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Bruce, for speaking up for our secondary kids. Appreciate that. Now we're gonna have an update on the athletic budget from CFO Feather and Assistant Superintendent Beckett.
Yeah, I'll, because I like it. I'll be smiling.
You see how it goes, right? So, Vice Chairman Thomas and members of the board, Trustee Bruce had asked for a report on some information on our sports and activities costs and like how is that money spent, where does it come from? And so we worked with Elmira and Mr. Beaver and Lou Wolf, our athletic director, and to put together some information for you. And so I hate to read all this to you, but this is just so you know that Idaho doesn't require school boards to offer, you're not required to offer extracurricular opportunities for students and provide, because it doesn't provide any funding for specific activities. But our board and our community value this comprehensive program that includes a rich variety of activities for students. And we know students are engaged if they're engaged in sports or activities, band, choir, whatever that is, they are more likely to be engaged in school and stay in school and able to maybe pursue that further on. But we fund these opportunities through the cost sharing among the district and families in our community. And Mira's going to explain what that means. Like, what does the district pay for? What do families, how does that work with families and also with our community? So that's kind of what Elmira is going to share a little bit tonight about how that money is kind of where it comes from. So if you want to go to the next slide, Elmira will explain this one.
Thank you. So trustees, this is, I would call it kind of a map, who pays for what. And this slide is a high level, kind of a big picture slide. And then in the next slide, I will go a little bit more into the details, especially related to the transportation. But just to help you navigate the slide, on your left, for example, I try to connect the charts together. For example, if you look at the left column represents where the funds come from, like who pays for it. And then the right column lists the examples of the expenses, what the funds are being used for. So the question is, if the state doesn't fund it, where do funds come from? So one of the major expenses, the upper line, are the salaries for our coaches and advisors. So over here, I listed the state discretionary funding. So as you already know, the state funds us for FTEs, for transportation, and we know there is a gap between the formula and between what we actually have. And in addition to that, they also allocate us discretionary fund, usually between $19,000 to $20,000 per unit. And they tell us, okay, there's no strings attached, you use it at your own discretion, you can cover the gaps. So, and this is the fund that we use to fund salaries for coaches and advisors. That's part of our annual budget. And the average cost is $554,000. And then we have, so that's the only state funding sort of that we use. Everything else comes from our community, from our families. For example, we have participation fees, and on average, with the increased fee, we are estimating it should be between $25,000 to $30,000 a year. But unfortunately, it will never cover the true transportation expenses. And the next slide, I will go kind of into more details. There's always going to be a gap. We will have good years, and we will have probably, it depends on the cost of fuel, could be not so good years. So I'm kind of projecting there's always going to be a gap here. But then we have other fees that we're collecting, gate fees, admission fees, and the fees that we're collecting from gates we use to pay officials and activity workers. And the reason those boxes are gray, because the expenses are limited to the revenue. We do not overspend those buckets. So as an example, we earn $5, we spend $5. So if there's no earnings that year, there's no spending that year. So it's kind of the methodology is being used so we do not go into the deficit. And the same as with fundraisers, gold cards, ASB cards. So all the earnings from these cards have been used for uniforms, miscellaneous equipment, and supplies. And of course, we have our boosters clubs, Idaho code allows the community to manage it outside of the district's accounting system. And of course, our property taxes stay on the construction of the facility itself, not the activities. And unless you have any questions, I would like to talk about the transportation. So it's a statewide problem. So this activity is not funded, and no matter how much you collect, it's most likely you're going to be behind. The revenue will never match the expenses, so you have to come up with the difference. And it doesn't mean we cannot solve it. You know, there are options, there are many options, but they're not perfect options. That means with the limited budget, something's going to give. So in order to cover this deficit, it has to come from somewhere else. So, so when I started, these are not, we don't need to make any decisions. This is just kind of plugging in all the conversations, not even options or ideas. What can we do to close the gap? And I can also share what we're currently doing, which is not on the list. So for example, could we use our general fund balance and allocate more from the discretionary funds for transportation or any other expense over here? We can. There is nothing in item code says we cannot. So what that means, and I just put an item, the amount as an example, it would be an additional expense request to the budget item. Something we will do probably in April, so we're ready by June to include it in the official budget for the next year. And like I said, options are not perfect, but could we reduce bus services for competition and encourage guardians to provide transportation for their students? A lot to be researched here because does it mean we have to change a policy? Is there any potential increase in liability? So conversation, this is, or can we ask the community to add a cost in the future supplemental levy in lieu of some other costs? This is probably, it's not a feasible option, but it's also an option. Could we ask families to pay more in fees? But based on my estimations, in order for us to break even, the fees almost have to double, and it just doesn't seem feasible to compare to other districts. And most commonly used option, trim funding for other projects. And I mean, the options, there are many, many other options. So right now, what we're using, when we, at the end of the year, I estimate the deficit, and I call it, it's kind of a silly word, but I call it sweeping breadcrumbs together. So I work with principals, and we go through all their supplies accounts, $50 here, so we do not let them carry over the balance, and I know they're smiling because they don't like it, so we take the money back and we cover the deficit. So this is what we're currently doing because that's our process, just find money somewhere else and cover the deficit. So, and this is a lot of information just in one slide. I'm here for any questions. I will write them down. And I have a great team from high school over here to help me if there are any questions that are not money related. Questions about fees and everything. So, and I can provide more details about each category, like how much did we collect, what was spent, what was the expense last year. So I'm here for any questions you may have.
I just need to clarify, so you take from the principals out of the school general fund budget, or is it, okay?
Out of their supply account.
Got it. Just wanted to clarify that.
Or I think if one sport has money left over, they use that for a different sport to kind of adjust on the
Oh,
fees.
No,
Not that I know of.
not from the sports club, no, just from supply.
From their general supply.
Oh, yeah, just to clarify. So, as a district, we also allocate supply money based on the enrollment that are not related to any of the clubs. It's just supplies for classrooms. So yeah, because we're not allowed to touch any fundraiser or anything, and those funds are being carried over from year to year. Just the supply, the general fund supplies for classrooms that we take back.
So in other words, you're saying any PTO or PTA money they don't take out of that?
Yeah.
It's been generated to something else they can.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
You know, your paper,
It's just the other general fund.
copy budget, those
Yeah.
kinds of things.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah.
And if you think of any questions, because it's a lot of information to, go through, just send us a request and we'll
I do have something from the past. Wasn't there a time where the legislature said you cannot charge parents or people for, is that?
We can't do it
For curriculum.
Co-curricular. So what is that?
Somebody's getting her grade for
for
some.
band or
Band?
It's a class.
If you're getting a
But
grade
you can
for it.
charge for football.
If you're getting a grade for it.
I just wanted to understand that better. Thank
So if
you.
we wanted to charge a program fee, we could per sport.
It sounds
Which
like you
would
can, I'm
help.
just double checking, because at one time I thought the law said you couldn't, but
Yeah.
that's why I'm double checking.
Because I know, like, obviously you can't judge from $0 to $1,000, but maybe $300 to $500 per child, per sport.
I was gonna say, I remember one time paying $800 for my
Right.
boys in the year.
So So I mean, obviously, like, you can't just go from $0 to $1,200, but it would be feasible to have a program fee and build a program and pay to play, like other districts do, which would give the kids the things that they need.
The hard part with that is some of the parents who pay those prices are upset because their kids don't play. I'm just gonna throw that out. That does occur. In other words, if I'm paying $100 and my kid doesn't play, I'm not a happy parent, and that has happened.
There's
Just
a lot of
saying.
happy, unhappy parents.
Well, I'm
now,
just
too, and they don't
saying
pay.
that does happen, so you have to be careful. You have to be careful with that, because you're charging to play.
I shared with us that the numbers for fall sports, and the increase for every sport has gone up. That's pretty cool that we've got, and especially like in soccer, we've got 38, we've got from 38 to 54 girls soccer.
That's
Which is
awesome.
pretty cool. On football, 163 to 176. And another big increase was, boys soccer too, 24 to 33. And swimming went up, went to golf. A lot of people want to golf apparently, 19 to 24. So we're seeing an increase, so it's good that kids want to
I
be
think it's
involved,
awesome
you
to
know.
give kids something to do after school. The other thing I realize is that we're one of the only schools, very few schools has a JV football team, is that correct? So I think that's awesome, we give those kids an opportunity to play. I think it's great.
Well, I think it would be good to find some kind of resolution so that we're not in deficit and that we're not borrowing from Peter to pay Paul, so that we can have like functioning programs and give these kids something a little bit more. Thank you. Yes, thank you for doing this.
Okay, is there anything, can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, Lucy?
Okay.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are now going to move on to delegations. I do want to remind people that this is a business meeting for the trustees to complete the business of the district. It is not a town hall meeting or a question and answer period. We will be listening to speakers, but not respond or act during the meeting, as deliberating without the topic included on the agenda could be considered an open meeting law violation. We do not allow things directed at criticizing employees, and of course, we reserve the right to stop any individuals who get unruly or fail to follow these rules. So we are going to start this evening. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. Your timer is going to be up here. I know it's going to be behind you, but Deanne can give you a clue when it's getting close.
30 seconds.
Okay, when she gets 30 seconds, she'll start going like this, okay? We're going to start with Tony's, I'm sorry, I will butcher your last name. Still at the high school and the GSA president. Go ahead, I'm sorry. You're fine.
Hello, Vice Chairman and members of the board. My name is Angelina Ciola. I'm a senior at Kuna High and the president of our school's GSA. It's come to my attention that some parents may be concerned why our school has a GSA, otherwise known as a Gender Sexuality Alliance or a Gay Straight Alliance. Sorry, but I'm here to tell you why you really don't need to be concerned. Our school's GSA is here to provide a safe space for all students, no matter what. According to the Trevor Project, an organization made to respond to the public health crisis of teen suicide rates. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among young people in the United States. LGBTQ plus youth are 4 times more likely to harm themselves than their peers. This rate only increases with trans youth, and again when bullying is involved. I was one of these people, but I was lucky and I had a support system. My parents, my teachers, my friends are why I'm here today. But there could just easily be a student who doesn't feel like they have that system. And that's one of the most amazing things about GSA. We're just a group of kids trying to be there for one another, and I truly don't understand how you can fear that. If meeting can make a teenager's day a little easier. That is just amazing and absolutely what we're all about. But here's the issue. We struggle to get our name and our mission out to students. Many kids may not even know what a GSA is, how we can help, the people we can meet. And a majority of the members I know have only learned about the club from word of mouth. But that's not always reliable. One way I found out about GSA was spotting Mrs. Sharkey's flag in her room. It was just a simple thing, but that something felt so powerful and safe all at once. That's what's important. Safety. That's what matters most. I was terrified to go to school. I was being bullied every day. I was scared. But that simple thing, a fleeting glance through an open door, it made all the difference. You may not understand it, but it's a reminder for all students it applies to, that this is safe, that you're safe. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Daniel Spilwa.
Hello, I'm Tony's father, and I've witnessed firsthand their reaction to not going to go to school. For the first couple of years of their high school career, they spent time at home because of COVID. And so literally their junior year was basically their freshman year. And, being somebody who's, got bullied as a kid also for being a boy little kid, but now it's more because of somebody's, being LGBTQ. And it's kind of, it's still the same stuff and it hurts, but you as a parent, you can't stop it. You can give them advice and, tell them it will get better. But with these groups, they were talking about groups earlier, they got football and basketball, whatever, for everybody to come together and do one common goal and play together. This is all these kids are asking for. They're still kids trying to exist, trying to get, make friends and, have a community for each other to rely on. Instead of going back home and crying in their rooms and thinking the world hates them. It's, it's a sense of community. That's why these groups like this are good for these kids. It's not costing the school board anything. It's just the kids get up after school, meet, and have fun. Like they play D&D sometimes, they go to GSA. These groups are a necessity for all kids, gay and straight. These kids need these extracurricular activities to go find each other and get off the damn phones and just go talk to people. Not worry about who's going to bash them on Facebook or whatever, TikTok. They need this community. They need these classes. They need to talk to each other, to know they're supported. I can't just say they're not. I mean, I'm an veteran, and having that community of other people in a unit, knowing they got your back. That's how we got through stuff when I was in Iraq. We had each other. We knew that person would take care of me. This is the same mindset these kids have. This group is going to help me get through this, and that's why they need it. Thank you.
Julia Sharkey.
I'm Julie Sharkey. I'm a teacher at Kuna High School, and I'm the GSA advisor. I've been teaching in Canada for 8 years. I was hesitant to speak today because I did not want members of the community to misconstrue my speaking in support of my students as speaking in support of some activist agenda. But I realized I would be just as bad as others who are telling my students in their club, hey, we support you, but are doing nothing. They don't need words, they need action, and that is more important to me than being a guest star on some Facebook page. So here's the truth about GSA, not rumors or speculation or fear-mongering. GSA has been a club on campus for over a decade. It's one of the most active clubs in terms of student involvement and participation in campus events. All events and activities the club engages in are planned and operated by the students in the club because it is a student-led organization. My co-advisor and I do not generate ideas, we do not tell students what to do, we do not create club materials, and we certainly do not connect our students with outside organizations or strange adults. We ensure the club follows school rules and school policy, and we provide snacks. The club consists of freshmen through seniors, and members run the gamut of interests and activities. We have band kids and athletes, kids who identify as conservative, and kids who identify as liberal. There's theater kids and tech wizards. We've got popular class presidents and lonely kids who have only found friendship and acceptance in GSA. The purpose of the club is simple: to create a safe and welcoming place for all kids. That usually consists of playing games, making art, and who can top each other with the world's dumbest joke. What I couldn't tell you is how many kids in that club identify as LGBTQ or straight, because one of the rules of the club is that you do not ask about other people's sexuality. It's a very important rule because a student's sexuality is no one else's business, and because GSA is in no way attempts to influence student identities and preferences. Again, it is simply a safe place for our most vulnerable kids to feel welcome and accepted. I believe Club Policy 215 has been designed to target the GSA Club, and I feel strongly about this because no other club on the inaccurate list has a flag. That's because no other club on the list needs a flag. That's because no other club on the list serves a student population with a suicide attempt rate of 50%. That's because no other club on the list needs to advertise a safe space because their members are not viciously, physically, and verbally abused every time they walk down the hallway. The GSA flag is not a political statement and it harms no one. It is meant to be a lighthouse to students who are often in the darkest moment of their lives. Taking it down extinguishes that lighthouse. Taking it down says so much more to them than you will ever understand. Our club has a long history. This is not the first time it's been targeted. First we were told we couldn't have it in the hall, then they were told they couldn't have it in other teachers' rooms, and now they're being told they can't have it at all. I wonder where it's going to stop. Okay? So what will the board do? The research is clear. GSA clubs make campuses safer for all students. So will you just tell them you want them to be safe and happy and accepted, or will you act?
Quincy Youngstead.
Well, I won't be popular following this. Thank you for allowing us to come up here and talk to you guys. So the first thing that I want to say is that I've had a lot of opportunities lately to talk with the public. Some of them are students, some of them are moms, some of them are teachers, some of them work for the district, a lot of just random different types of people. And one thing that I keep hearing over and over and over again is that teachers continue to talk about gender ideology in the classroom through pronouns or names. And I am up here today because I would like to say that gender ideology is a thing for certain, and people are definitely grappling with it, but I do not believe, and I represent a lot of people in this community, we do not believe that it is a place for public school administration, such as teachers, to engage in this, especially because there was a law that was passed that prohibited things, not pronouns, but with names, and having this kind of stuff not enforced in a way with policies and with oversight. So I'm just reporting to you what I am hearing from the public. So you guys may not necessarily get these reports for whatever reason, but I'm just up here to let you know that I hear a lot of information from people. And I just want to conclude with this. Matthew 18:6 in the Bible says that if anyone causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble, it would be better for them to have a large millstone hung around their neck and to be drowned in the depths of the sea. I would like each of you to think about that. Because you know what? The way that you conduct your policies, your processes, your procedures, the way that you guys oversee your teachers and different people that work in your administration, you are accountable unto the Lord Jesus Christ. Thank you.
Christy Hardy.
Chairman Grant, trustees. Trustees, thank you for continuing with the third and final reading of policy 952. So that was just completed. This is something the Parents for Policy Change have been seeking since the fall of last year. The board was unwilling to take a stand unless there was legislation to back them up. So we tried to help with that. We put together a petition, circulated it in the community, turned it into legislators, testified in favor of the proposed law while it went back and forth through the State House. And now we're here at the finish line. So thank you. I see it as a celebration. The reason it was so important is because some of our own kids are being negatively impacted by the approach that our school district has taken. Girls allowed in the boys' bathroom, boys allowed in the girls, and unsuspecting students caught in the crossfire because there was no public policy to let them know what was permissible. Just as was acknowledged earlier, just last month on August 8th, the school board meeting, a parent explained her daughter's shocking experience at Kuna High School when a boy came into the girls' bathroom while she was using it. And this girl didn't tell anyone because, as far as she knew and knows, it's allowed. Last year, my son and all his friends knew that there was a girl who used the boys' bathroom in Fremont. So I was surprised to read the weekly news update from yesterday with a section on rumors, and it's where it said, and I'll quote, "Boys, male students are freely walking in and out of the girls' female bathrooms." And then the answer was not true. Male students do not walk freely in and out of the girls' bathrooms. And yet, someone just spoke about that last month. So here at this board meeting, and so it does happen, and again, that everyone should just acknowledge that and show that that's coming to an end. And what I'd like to know is how you'll be able to communicate to students that this is no longer permissible. They need to know about the change to prevent infractions in the future. This law allows for a civil cause of action if the schools fail to take reasonable steps to prevent unauthorized restroom use. And so the district can be at risk of a lawsuit, which, obviously we want to prevent. I would like to see the public funds protected. And so I've already asked and have not gotten an answer, but what will be done to just make sure the students know the change? I don't think this meeting is sufficient. We don't have people watching it that much. So it'd be best just for everyone to just have full transparency on the issue. And we got a couple seconds left. So I just wanted to mention that removing the GSA gay pride flag during class time doesn't change the ability for them to meet. I wish parents could learn more about the club. I've asked and not been given answers either. And I think, again, if there was transparency, there wouldn't be the conflict. So, thank you.
Dominic Lopez.
I'm a sophomore at Kuna High School. I'm here to share a testimony of some concerns and experiences that I've had. I walk through the hallways where I witness many things that parents would be appalled to know happen once they drop their kids off at school. You have a generation of students that are confused, overwhelmed, and yet empowered in that. My mother asked me recently a question that she was very concerned about my answer to. She said, if I was able to walk into your classrooms unannounced, would I be surprised at what I see? Would I be shocked that I allow my child to be in such a setting? I told her yes, you'd probably be very appalled. Don't get me wrong, there are some good teachers here. In fact, one of my awesome media tech teachers are here. But I said, yes, Mom, you'd probably be appalled at some behaviors, dress attire that's inappropriate, and seems no policy is really enforced. I also explained where some teachers call students by a preferred name and pronouns. For example, today we took ISATs, and the teacher had announced you do need to use your legal names. I'm usually fine with your preferred names, but for this you need to use your legal names. This may be some students thriving academically, and many great things have been brought up here this evening. But I truly see that there is so much attention and things that do not belong in my education, and we are all navigating unnecessary waters, making the high school experience that much harder. I want to learn in unity alongside all my peers and not force my views on them or theirs on me. Academics is a very small percentage of what takes up my concerns and attentions when it should be my grades. Everything you do as a school matters. Sometimes people bring small kids into the school for whatever reason, whether it be a parent-teacher conference, a choir concert, or a sports event. And I think it's really unfortunate for people children can walk down the halls and see things they don't need to. My sister included, I don't need her to be influenced by controversial or mature things. I don't want her to ever worry about using a school restroom and becoming a victim like you've seen so much lately. My generation needs you to take a good look at us and partner with our parents. I'm not just here for myself, but for my own sister that could be a future student at Kuna High School. We need your help and some structure. Please don't let us stand by watching and do something for us. Lastly, so many parents feel like they're in the dark with what goes on a day-to-day basis at Kuna High School. The truth is, as much as us teens think that we're pretty grown up, we're all still somebody's kids. And that the school itself should always remember that. Thank you.
Kind Youngin, number 10. Sorry. I'm gonna grab one of these chairs. I can't stand very long. I am kind of young, and I'm speaking on regards to the parent school visits that I just think is part of enjoying the whole atmosphere of what's happening. But also, I have some questions about some of the guidelines that I saw in KSD3 news that you have. And my question is, why more than a week that we have to wait for our request to be done? Why can't we just, at least in a few days, or what's the deal with that? And it makes me think the teacher will teach on that day I visit something other than they would really teach. And it causes suspicion. And I don't want our teachers to be under that at all, but we want the teachers to be transparent also. We know that you are transparent, but some of the teachers, you can't be there all the time. And so we as parents, because we do pay their salaries, we want to know what's going on in the classroom also, especially with all these different things changing in our society. We want to see what's going on in the classroom. And why do parents have to sign a waiver saying that they won't speak of what they see in the classroom, but they don't have to when attending a KSD-sponsored events where children are taught and led and coached, such as choirs and plays and sporting events? It seems like it's kind of an abuse of power almost. Same thing as that you're looking at other children watching them, but they don't forfeit their right to come back to the school and observe again. Why do we forfeit that thing if we talk about what's happening in the schools? I think that would be a wonderful thing to talk about what's going on in the schools, or if a teacher's doing well, or if you have a problem with the teacher, to have a communication about it. I'm not talking about these kids, talking about kids, but the teaching. And they are free to talk about all they want. How can you use FERPA in one setting and not another? We would like a process to observe the teachers teaching, and we pay their salaries, and so I ask for you to do that. Thank you. Hillary Littlewood.
3 minutes fast.
Trustees, Wendy, or superintendent. I don't know the right way to address.
Wendy's good. We've known each other.
I know. Wendy was my elementary teacher. I mean, not elementary, gosh. You're not that old. I'm not that old.
We're not that old.
Okay. I've spoken to a few of you about the policy 639, parents' rights in education, and I just felt like section 1 of the law was more appropriate to be at the beginning, and because it's basically defining reasonable accommodation, which applies to the whole law. The policy committee and anyone else who's been working on these has revamped this policy, and I don't want to delay it any further, so I'm not asking for that, but we got these printed up and showed where we can move that from the parents' rights to object to learning material up to the front of the policy, and it's just a simple cut and paste the whole paragraph. So my purpose in that is because as a parent, I want to be able to go read a policy and be able to see the intent of the law without having to go back and forth between the law. And I feel like the reasonable accommodation definition applies to parent involvement, objections to learning material, observation in the classroom, health screenings, surveys, all those that are included in the policy. Thank you very much. And you can just keep that right now, but for future reference. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your participation. We're down to some unfinished business. We need an update from the listening tour and election consideration. Superintendent Johnson and Director Wilson.
This first, run the way we do it. Okay. I can't do it in a minute though, trustees, I'm sorry.
You have two.
So unfinished business. Early in the spring after the bonds were successful, we shared plans to go out and survey and to listen to the community to get a better feeling about what happened. So we did a couple of things, and from June to September we had our survey, which many of you have seen probably taken. We also, many of the folks in this room went out to Kuna Days to listen to folks in our community. And so that totaled about 1,730 people that we listened to, either through the survey or in person. And you can see here the statistics of how they reported themselves. Almost 60% voted, you know, a chunk were parents, a chunk were employees, and a chunk were property owners. So we're going to give you a high-level summary of that data. It's been reviewed previously, and Superintendent Johnson will talk about that by a group of citizens. So next slide, please. So one of the first questions were about the bond proposal itself. Here were the key elements on the bond. Did you support them, yes or no? And you can see the big parts about adding new learning spaces from elementary to high school. You see pretty high levels of support from folks who participated. The section about busing, not so much. And then some folks said about 17, rounded up 18% didn't support any of the projects. Next slide. So we had lots of opportunities to weigh in with open comments, which can be challenging to share with you without having hundreds and hundreds of pages. So we had one of our teachers at the high school who's doing an administrative internship, Mr. Townsend, go through and categorize some of these for you. So we had 4, you don't have to answer all the questions, so 457 answered why did the bond fail. And so just the top 3 that we could talk about would be number 1, not enough people voted. Number 2, believe that the bond would raise your property taxes too high. And then the third one, too much money requested. And you can see the other kind of themes he found in the data. Next one. So we shifted in the online survey to help people say, so we have more kids coming in the same learning spaces. How do we serve more kids in the same spaces? And we asked them for a couple of different options to look at. This was a forced rank survey, so if you took it, you had to pick a 1, 2, and 3, and vice versa. So it was different shifts we could do to serve more kids in the same space. So morning, afternoon shifts, hybrid, go there kind of hybrid, in person, or year round. And you can see which one was the number 1 choice and the first rate year round option. Next one. So another option to manage more kids in the same space was some different things about rezoning that we've talked about, and then maybe increasing class sizes. So you can see the support for that, or not support for it. So we have here, add 4 or 5 more kids to our class size ratios. Here, rezone, so elementary, some of the pressure off of green is taken away with some rezoning. And then make our 2 high schools, our comprehensive high schools, separate. Swan Falls and Kenai. And you can see support for those ideas. The next big area had to do with, so if we serve more kids in the same space, do we just get down to the basics? So we have more teachers, class sizes are smaller. And so we asked them again, a forced rank choice of, you could reduce staff and reassign them to the basics, which would you support? And we both based the ones that were the top choices. So the top first one was to look at kindergarten programs. And over here, eliminate non-required programs such as sports and activities. Again, 25%, rank that as second. But it was 6 choices, so you're going to see some variety, and you can see the other topics there.
And this was forced, it wasn't like we liked these ideas
No.
necessarily, right?
Yeah. Next one. So then we asked some questions. You may recall that we were talking about bonds and the new money that we're getting to reduce property taxes. So we're almost near the end here. So is it important to pay off our debt before we ask for a new bond? And so that was no. Pretty clear, 70%. And then the next property question was, we get this new money. Do we pay off debt faster, or do we pay it off, make the window a one-time payment a lot smaller? Essentially is how I'm summarizing it. You can see here, use new state money in addition to annual taxes to pay off debt earlier, which I believe you did last
We
meeting.
did last meeting, yes.
So your community, you took the survey, you're in line with it. And I'm gonna transfer this over to the superintendent, so.
Thank you, Austin, I appreciate you. Oh, there was one more.
Oh.
And this was just that, like, we only asked those people who said they didn't vote, and then we asked them why. And so the percentages aren't total percentages of all the people that, the 1,700 plus people that answered it. It was just of those 483 people that said they didn't vote. And so you can kind of see why, like, that from they had a conflict to they weren't registered or they forgot, and then it was like we didn't support it or didn't know about it. So you kind of get the sense of kind of that why they didn't vote. So we took the data from the survey and the listening sessions, and we asked some people who were part of the original capital plan and some other people that came forward and said, I want to help. I'm really worried about this, and asked them to come and just help us make sense of the data, and then to give us their input on what next steps we might take. So I summarized some of their feedback here. That most components of the bond received strong support. So the original bond, as you can see in the data, people, almost a super majority there, supported at least 3 of the components, the high school edition, middle school edition, at an elementary school. Transportation hub, maybe not so much, right, from that data. More work needs to be done in outreach to voters without a connection to the district. You saw our early response to that is reaching out to, through the utility bill. We've been sending information out in a kind of a quarterly fashion, just sort of 1 page front and back, somewhat simple just to be able to do that. We're thanking the city for allowing us to do that. They gave us feedback that said a detailed plan of what happens when the new classroom space is needed. So when we are full, and we're getting close, as you saw in those percentages earlier, what are we going to do without additional classroom space? That was pretty clear from the group. Last time we said we didn't want to focus on that. We wanted to talk about more about being proactive, and the input from the group was like, we need to let them know, the community know what's going to happen. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And then obviously the ongoing continued need to educate the community about funding, how we get funding, and you can see in some of the input, there's still a challenge with us explaining what certain buckets of money are used for. And a Get Out the Vote campaign is needed for any future bond. We talked a lot about, there was a lot of like what the school district needs to do, but then there's a lot of things that the school district can't do. You know, we can inform, but we can't persuade, for example. So spent some time talking about a group that would come together and really take this on and help us with educating the community about it. And there was mixed support on a November 7th election. So you'll see on the agenda, there's an action item, but we're hoping you won't act based on analyzing their input. So the support for a November election, as you know, the March election is no longer available to us, was really about capturing the excitement of a new school year. But the concern that came back, and Trustee Johnson, jump in as you were in the room, the concern kept coming back, we need people to engage in this, and we don't know if 6 weeks is really enough time to get the level of engagement and communication that's needed. Would you add anything from what your role was?
I mean, I think it was mixed support, but I guess at least in the group I was with, I think it would be maybe 70-30 as far as opposed to it. I mean, there were some who wanted us to proceed forward and felt like we should proceed forward, but I think there was more concern, more wondering whether we could really gear that up appropriately, and we do it again and don't do a great job, and then it fails again, and then we're kind of in even worse shape. I think was kind of the consensus. Not a consensus, but it was a pretty wide variety of concern there. Right? So,
thank you for sharing that. So, our recommended next steps is that we wouldn't act to run another bond at this point, and that we would spend now and probably November until November, potentially, putting together a solid plan of what to do for a target of a May election, which would mean March would be when you would act to do that. But we wouldn't start acting, getting information out in March. We would have a plan together. So we would definitely need to begin to create the work of, so what happens if it doesn't pass? We'd probably do some more work on, okay, we have these 3 needs in elementary, middle, and high school. Where should we start? Should we start, we've heard all sorts of things in our listening sessions in particular, start with the high school, right? Then I talk to somebody else and they say, no, start with the elementary, we're getting overcrowded. So we're kind of doing some work on what that next bond would look like. So we're ready for that. And then as you can see, that detailed plan for what we need to do now, what we would do, should we not have additional space. And I think one of the things that we need to also do a better job of, people have said year-round, but I think they mean that we're going to go to school, all of us year-round, and really what it is kids are on different tracks. And so, elementary, you might be going to school for 9 weeks at a time, a track is off on, so you're moving kids all the time.
Which is also a cost, that's an extra cost.
Yes,
also.
and this valley used to do year-round school, and they stopped because of operational costs.
It's an extra cost because you're using everything year-round.
Yeah, so we'd have to have a budget for that as well that we need to bring to the board. But given that I think one of the clear messages the other night was yes and yes, have both, right? That was pretty clear. So we would need some time to get that going, both yes and yes, Go ahead.
Up until this point, it's been my understanding that Swan Falls has not been intended to be a standalone high school, and can it even be a standalone high school and without kids losing access to all the CTE programs we have over there, and that concerns me.
Yeah, I would answer it ish. Yeah, that's probably, could we offer many of the classes? We kind of do, we could. We would probably still be moving kids back and forth for some things. It would take some creative maneuvering. So like why people, said we were focused, some of the input we received is that we focus too much on gyms and fields and some of that kind of stuff. The reason why we don't have a full high school over there is we don't have a gym, so we don't really have fields to do physical education. So we'd have to figure that out. Is that an online physical education? Is it independent study? You know, whatever that is, we need to do some work. But you're absolutely right, it's not designed to do that. We could have 2 different attendance zones and still move kids back and forth, but that's another operational cost and time. Yeah. I don't know if I answered that very well, but it is,
I mean, I think
anything's
it is.
possible, but is it the right thing to do for kids? I think is maybe what you're asking.
Well, the whole idea of the bond is to finish that.
Yeah.
And then be able to make it
Exactly.
2 schools.
Yeah,
But
we
in the
could definitely do
meantime,
that.
it's a piecemeal thing that isn't gonna be
Yeah.
good for all students, which I have a problem with it,
Yeah.
or for a majority of students.
But then you would still have to bus some kids over there to
For
do,
programs.
to access programs,
Yes.
even when it is 2
Yes.
separate schools.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right, it's not formed yet to be 2 separate schools.
But even when it is, because they have such great programs, you still allow.
Yeah,
even
we
high
would still
school
move
We still do
students
some stuff.
to have access to those programs.
Yeah. So anyways, all of this saying that we would have a revised proposal to you, hopefully within the next few months, that you guys could mull over and then act on at a later time.
So what
If we're in the
I'm
right
kind
direction.
what I'm kind of hearing from you is that there was a yes, but there was more of like, wait, yes,
Yeah.
from the committee.
I would say, I wouldn't say it was that clear. There were definitely people that said, no, in order to do what we need to do, wait. And there were definitely people that said, there's momentum, let's go. So I would say that was clear. When we analyzed what people thought we needed to do and the timeline that we had in order to do it, we didn't think we could meet the timeline, if that makes sense. So in order to have a full-fledged plan,
Well, in order to let
that's gonna
people-
take some time.
If you go back to the things that people said, one of the things they said was that they didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Or they weren't informed, or we weren't transparent enough. How can we do all of that in less than
Right.
a month, really?
Yeah.
So if you're looking at what the constituents said, it's kind of like a oxymoron kind of
Yeah.
thing. I also was surprised, I don't know how you guys were surprised, with the bonds and the plant facilities that passed in August.
Yeah.
It seemed a lot more than I thought would happen.
Yeah.
That was amazing to me, I'm just gonna note that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess personally, if we need to do the things that people said we needed to do, then I can't see how we can do it in a month.
Yeah.
Personally.
And while I agree with that, I also, my other concern is that once we do run a bond, if it does pass, it will take us 2 to 3 years to be able to open the doors to a school. And so we keep kicking the can down the road.
We do, but then if you look at our enrollment, right now, we have a little breathing room, am I kind of correct in saying that? A little bit. And I know we've tried to be proactive, and that's what I want to be for kids. So I do think that too.
It would be nice to have it on an election ballot with other things, because
Yeah.
then people are already voting.
Yeah.
But that means we have to start like yesterday,
Yeah.
getting it out.
And this gives you a sense of what, like we've shared with you in the past, like what the next kind of year or 2 election cycles look like. When I think about what's in this school year, it's these 2 dates, right, November and May. And then what's really kind of in the next school year, August, November.
In a perfect world, I'd love to go November 7th and get it passed. I just don't know if I listen to what the constituents are saying, if that is viable to what we need to do,
Yeah.
to get all that information out, to be transparent, to do all that stuff. But May 17th is also a primary election type thing.
Yeah.
So you're looking at that too.
Different kind of election though.
It is.
It is.
It is.
It is.
I would say one of the good news from the survey is we had, we always, anytime we get some sort of survey or input, we always say, hey, do you want to get involved? And we have new names of people too that can, hopefully we can engage to join this effort of communicating and informing and helping to inform next steps, so.
So if the bond did pass in May, can we start in summertime?
Yes, we would work with, yes. It might be projects such as deferred maintenance, like we have an air conditioning issue at Kuna High.
Right.
We are keeping things going. I would say not very successfully, because we're just, one day it's hot in your room and the next day it's cool in your room, because we're moving the air, because we're on our last legs, right? So we'd probably do some of those things as we get things planned. We learned from our construction managers in the 2017 bond that bidding out projects is a lot more expensive in May, in the summer, because everybody's already got their projects lined up. So we'd probably be looking at a fall, getting things ready, planning for what's coming. So we'd probably be behind a little bit on construction.
Yeah, and here's another thing about construction in this valley. Meta and Micron are about to take off making these huge new buildings, and so the trades are going to be hard to get.
Yeah, and we have a school district that's building. We have been really, the money invested in the construction managers has saved us money. We've come in under budget. We've met the goals that we promised in the past bond. So I would, not that this is the form for that, but I think that was an investment worth pursuing to help us, especially in an even stranger environment with all the construction and
supplies are hard to come by. It's a mess out there.
So we don't need action. The only action we would need is if it was the desire of the board to investigate a November election. And because we don't have the resolution that we would approve, because it's sort of exactly where you wanted to go, we would have to have a special meeting to approve that resolution, because that resolution is due to the counties. I think it's the 18th of September. So.
I would love the November 7th election, but it's not realistic. So I think May 17th is probably a good goal.
So if we came back in November with some plans, maybe just start to share what we've been working on to keep you in the loop. That might be what we would be able to do by November.
I think that's a good plan.
Thank you, and I'm very appreciative to the group. Give us some really good input.
Okay. Now we're going to consider the appointment of a secondary parent alternate on the Policy Advisory Committee.
And I almost said trustee, I almost said chairman. Sort of last meeting, we had our high school parent rep had a wonderful thing of all of her kids have now graduated. So now she's not a parent of a high school student anymore. So she has stepped away from our committee. We do have an alternate parent that you guys chose, whose child is a high school and a middle school, so they fulfill those requirements. So our recommendation is to have the alternate become our new high school parent rep.
And you've spoken to that person and they're okay with that?
I did email and see if they were still interested in it.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
Who is that?
Who's the alternate?
Who's the alternate?
I can say his first name is the same as mine, but his last name is tricky. Rezig. There's a C and a Z in there.
I'll move to appoint the secondary parent alternate to fill that vacancy on the Policy Advisory Committee.
And I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Aye.
Kim? Aye. Motion carries.
I think we're officially out of alternates. Everyone's gonna stay on there, post forever. I'm not gonna sit down.
All right, so let's just move right on into our first reading. Go ahead and start with policy 639, and we want these to be done in about 20 minutes, so.
No, I see there's people that are like, oh, kidding. There's people in the front row that like you to put this room at time. I have information. I have as much information as you guys need on these, or if you want me to give you a quick like for instance, 639, remember it went to first read in July? And the board asked us to take it back as that advisory committee to better organize it. And then we suggested about maybe like terms. It was updated by title and it reflected the statute 336001. And it's all kind of in one section with the parent rights as a reference. We also added policy numbers by each different section that had a policy that was attached to it. Kind of a table of contents for lack of a better
Questions or comments on this? I guess I was gonna ask, is it something we should look at? It's maybe that I haven't looked at that.
I think that's something that we can look at if we need to at our next policy advisory committee meeting.
In the past, if you guys had said, hey, look at this or change this one thing as a second read, we've done that with a couple of them.
Okay.
When I was looking at the code, it is the first paragraph within Idaho code, so it does make it assume that it applies to every section within the code. So I think it would be a good idea to move the paragraph or add a sentence where it says that it gives the parent, the guardian, the right to reasonable academic accommodation from students, and then if you wanted to somehow note that it explains it in the policy, you can do that, just so parents understand that it is aligning with code and they don't have to go back to the code and refer back to it. Just some sort of requirement that is within the code and policy.
In other words, it doesn't change anything, it
No.
just makes it easier for parents.
Right.
After reading all of this stuff, I'm all for making it easier. This is a lot of.
Because it is the first paragraph in the code, so it is assuming that reasonable accommodation is aligning with every single breakdown within the code. It's not just a paragraph within itself, it's within each bullet that they put within the code.
There's hills I'm willing to die on and hills that I'm not willing to die on, and I think this, I don't think the order of it makes a huge amount of difference, but if people feel like that's something that would be helpful or an advantage, then I don't see any reason to really have a big problem with it either, so.
Okay, so we can take it back to you want to take that back to the policy advisory committee, or do you want to make a decision?
Well, that's kind of up to you. We can make a motion and
Yeah,
do
we
it,
do that.
or we can make a motion to send it back, so.
So
If-
let's keep moving since we got moving parts.
I was gonna say, I just,
let's
I don't think it needs to go back to the committee for that. I just assume we do that. They're gonna be busy. I did have a question, and I know you got it, about if a parent decides that they do not want to use the adopted curriculum. And as I read this, I'm just trying to make sure that it states that it isn't just up to the parent. My understanding is, let's say I'm an high school English teacher, and a parent doesn't want to do the assignment I have, then I should have an extra assignment or something. We've talked about this with the curriculum, that parent could do, correct? So it wouldn't necessarily be up to the parent to do that, right? Or define that.
There's, in the case of an English classroom,
Right.
having been an English
We
teacher,
talked about that.
we were always like, what's the alternate?
Right.
What's the another option?
Right.
In the case of like sex ed, like we've talked about in the past in policy, it may be that the parent does not want an alternate assignment. maybe.
Right.
For the whole semester.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just want to make sure that that's what that clarifies, that it isn't just left up to the parent, that it is between the parent and the school, whether they do a different assignment or whether they choose to just opt out.
That was my question too, because I know it is a practice that we have, that there's an alternate assignment if there's one section under lesson
Yeah.
10 or something. So
So I don't want to see this novel. or
Right,
something.
so I don't know if maybe in the policy we can put an extra sentence where it specifically states that there will be an alternate assignment if the parent wants to opt out of a certain section, instead of the just curriculum in questions that made me think that I had to come up with these separate myself. So just clarification on, okay, if you want to opt out of a whole semester or a whole curriculum, yes, obviously. I think if there's partnership with the teacher and the parent with certain subjects, if they want to do that. That way at least they're being taught the right thing at home, if that's an option.
What the parent would like to have happen.
Yeah, I know with like sex ed, I mean, if there's just basic requirements, you would just like, these are the requirements, pick something, is that how you would break it down?
I think it would be a conversation with the
teacher.
parent and the teacher, yeah.
So I guess just something in the policy that states that there will be an alternate assignment if there's just some book or section or a piece.
I believe that's covered in policy 1002. That's on third reading that we've already approved in the consent agenda.
I didn't see that in there.
It was under this consent agenda. It's
Oh,
up about,
I didn't see that one.
it's E.
Well, I know that.
No.
Well,
for me,
having it.
This says exactly what you're saying. I mean, I think it says it, I just want to clarify that that's what it says. I don't know if you need to change it, because I think that's what it says.
It was confusing to me.
Well, as I read it, that's where I read it. I just want to make sure that that's the way it was put.
I just wanted to make sure too.
Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. But if you look at the other one, I do a little arrow, it's exactly the same.
Is that what you're talking about?
That's what I was talking about. Yeah. So,
Well, that was, you did the first read to
yes. Yeah.
I want to make sure too, because it was one of the questions I had when we did
No,
the first
it
rental,
doesn't
so
show clarity, but
I
I want
just
to
wanted
make
to
sure.
make sure.
I mean, as I read it, that's how I read it, but I want to make sure everybody else would read it that way. So, I will step out, I'm fine with the way this is, and we'll add this part to the top. And I'm fine, unless somebody else has something else.
I do have a
So
question.
your motion is to move.
My motion, I'm just saying, I haven't made a motion, I'm just saying that that's what we all decide.
Okay, I did have a question about something else. Well, I wrote it down, so I guess I'll just ask the question. Okay. Somewhere in here, it looks like district policy, I thought it was in 1,000. But I can't even see.
Our 1,000 is 1,002.
Okay, so school visitation by parents or guardians. Okay, so it says observation of individual classrooms during instructional time shall be permitted of the building principal or designee and teachers prior approval and consent with district policy. Is this the policy or is there a process that you guys also are including along the policy?
This would be the policy, and then we have put a process in place to ensure timeliness of response, safety of students, and clarity. For example, it was mentioned tonight that one of the things that we ask is a privacy. Because sometimes if a person is in a classroom, they may see a student have a seizure. They could see a student have a behavior issue. They could see a learning disability. They could see a lot of things that are typically fairly private matters. And we have had issues in the past, especially in light of social media, where a parent or someone has disclosed that information in a public setting. We're responsible for keeping that child's privacy in. And so we have a process that as a parent sign, in order to be in a classroom, kind of similar to like a volunteer. If you're observing instruction, you may see things. It's not as an attempt to keep things quiet and behind closed doors. It really is to ensure that we're keeping the privacy of individual students. We also put the process in place. It's similar to what other school districts around the valley are doing to ensure that we don't have sexual predators in the classroom and that it's manageable for the teacher, because our class sizes are pretty large, and we want to make sure that yes, we want visitors, we want partnerships, we want people to connect you know, because we believe that we're a partner in the work. But sometimes there are times when it's good to observe and sometimes maybe not as appropriate. So there is a process, and we sent it out, I believe, last week so people could see it. We had some input that thank you, and some input that's like, this feels like you're keeping me away from my students' classroom. So trying to find that balance. You know, we tend to maybe get a little too strict at first and then loosen up a little bit as we figure out what this looks like. So that's a long answer. So in the policy, it's fairly general, but the procedure is how we will ensure that we're complying with other laws that exist.
And as a former teacher, sometimes I may be teaching a lesson that's important for a standard, and 3 people come walking in, I lose everybody.
Yeah.
So it's important that the teacher understands that there may be somebody coming in, so that that lesson is appropriately to the standard, and that you're not bothering me as I'm teaching something important to my kids. Does that make sense?
No, I've observed the classroom before, so I've done that.
Yeah, and so you probably know that as soon as you walk in, they'll go.
Yeah.
Like that. You know.
I came in
But-
first in the morning, so that way I wasn't.
there you go.
I stayed all day.
And that's good. I think it's important that we have a good feeling tone between the community and the school. And you're right, it's a partnership. I don't want anyone to feel that they can't go into the school, or that we are doing something that is not correct or right, or we're not being transparent, because I don't think that's how
That's not the
educators feel.
intention.
That is
Yeah.
not the intention at all. So, and I know the way things are today, it may seem like that, but that's not the way it is. And so I understand, and I'm okay with this, the way that it states. I know that as a personal teacher, my principal always gave me 24 hours to let me know someone was coming in, just so I could take a look at my lesson plan and think, okay, wait, this is more appropriate, I won't lose my kids, or whatever. And this is elementary, of course. So,
No, I went through a process. and
yeah,
it's-
it is what it is, but I think it is for the kids and the teacher, and for you, the parent, make sure that it's a good visit. But, yeah, so.
Yeah, like what do you want to see? Sometimes you just, like, I want to see how
Yeah.
the teacher's teaching the math instruction.
Right.
And so that meeting to be able to align the timing.
But I
Teacher-
don't
so
want.
parent can see that.
I don't want parents to feel that they aren't invited in. I really don't think that that's what I would like any policy to say.
Yeah.
So
And I don't think that does say that, but maybe I'm
No,
wrong.
I was just asking if there was a separate process.
Yeah.
So that's what I was asking. I think that's clear.
Yeah.
So how does the principal decide or reserve the right to limit or refuse visitations? Like what's the breakdown for that?
I think it varies on individual case-by-case situations. Like I said, if the parent, like our process says the principal meeting beforehand. So it's just mostly like, we've had situations where, again, it's not a lot because we don't have a lot of visits. We mostly have volunteers, that kind of help. But like if a parent's struggling with helping a child with math instruction at home, that's a common concern we hear. The parent may want to see
What's being taught.
how is the teacher teaching this that's different than maybe I learned. And so in order to make sure that request is met, and we don't have like 5 adults in the room or whatever, maybe we do, maybe it's fine to have 5 adults, but I think individual people have different comfort levels with that. And I think Trustee Nixon kind of explained it really well. Maybe what you're teaching at the moment, if it's a critical reading skill that you need 100% focus, you may say, hey, could you come in tomorrow as opposed to today? So really trying to just meet both the needs of the teacher and the parent.
Right, I just want to make sure like if a parent is participating quietly and not participating in class, but just doing what they're agreed to do, that they're not just asked to leave because the teacher said they were uncomfortable or something.
Wouldn't the principal kind of let the parent know if there was something, and I hope this doesn't happen very often, but they're saying you don't have a right to visit or whatever.
Right.
I would think that the principal should give a reason why. And I hopefully that is very rare, in
Well, I
our school
understand that they're
districts.
being obstructive.
Yeah.
Teaching and that sort of thing. But when you observe, you're supposed to be quiet.
Right, right, and we've had some situations where, you know, we've had to ask somebody to leave because it was becoming disruptive, you know, to the teacher and the other students because they weren't able to focus on the students. But again, that's not common, it's a rare situation, but at least it allows for that conversation to happen.
Is there any way to see the process?
Sure, it's sent out, and I sent it to the trustees.
I think there's a
couple weeks
form,
ago.
yeah, there was a form they
Yeah.
had to fill out. It was something that they sent us, I read it.
Yeah, and I explained it to another parent who was giving me really good input, that, you know, CUNA, we used to know everybody, we used to know, all of us used to know each other. And so it's like, oh yeah, I had, you know, so-and-so's 3 other kids, you know, I have a relationship with the parent. We have a lot of new community members. And so it allows us to make sure that we're not letting in the right people into our classrooms. We don't want to inadvertently give access for the wrong person to be there. So somebody who's a predator, for example. We would have known that back in the day. You know, the enrollments, you know, when we were 2000, we knew every parent. We just did. And we have a lot of new people in our community. And it's not us being afraid of new people, it's really making sure, because we used to rely on those, you know, our relationships.
Yeah.
And since we can't really rely on that, we rely on
That's when we were
building
about,
that relationship.
as I say, that's when we were about 1,200, and now I've just heard we're about 30,000. So it makes a difference in your community,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. And we have some situations that I think that phrase, we're not in Kansas anymore, kind of like shocks us into that we're becoming a city as opposed to a little community.
No,
Yeah.
I understand background checks. I just want to make sure that the principal doesn't just decide on the terms that the teacher, but the parent wasn't doing something.
Right. Yeah. I think the intention is to allow. It's to meet the needs. And, you know, just like your own situation, sometimes you look like the best mom or dad, and sometimes you look like the worst mom or dad because of maybe behaviors that are going on too, you know, and being able to explain kind of some of what's been going on in the classroom.
So do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept policy number 639 with the added paragraph to the beginning that describes what the policy is about, to make it clear for parents.
Do we need to read that a little bit? or,
Well,
Just,
Go ahead. If you,
just so we're clear.
Yeah.
Um,
that's kind of a shaky, a little shaky that I brought that, but
So you're, as I understand your motion, it would be to move the paragraph titled, it starts, parents, guardians, and students are expected to abide by the district's policies, practice, and procedures governing the operation of the district schools. However, students, parents, or guardians have the right to reasonable academic accommodation from their child's school. And continuing on that entire paragraph, moving that to the introductory paragraph.
that would be correct. That's my proposal.
Is there a heading that goes with it?
It's
Parental
parental
objections
rights.
to learning materials or activities. Yeah, well, at the bottom.
So we'll just make it the first paragraph.
This, yeah.
Yeah,
Above annual notice?
So we'll notice. Okay.
right, underneath the red before.
I'll give this to you so you can see.
Is-
It's on there, it's paragraph 7. Which is parental objections.
It's-
Yep, that part.
Yeah, right there.
Moved up to the first paragraph.
Above annual.
So
Yeah, just above annual notice.
Just point of clarification, do we need that heading then, or do we need to do something with
I don't
that?
know.
Well, there are other paragraphs in that section, so.
Yeah. I think just the paragraph.
So you're taking the paragraph.
Just the paragraph and then leave the heading for the additional
Okay.
objections to
we've all added to the motion.
Okay.
Are we correct in what you wanted, Hillary? Leave the heading? Down below. Just the paragraph.
Just the paragraph, the heading stays with the other paragraphs that are below it.
Looking for a second.
Only second.
Okay, we go first and a second. Is there any further conversation about it? Okay. Kim?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Policy 681.
One down.
And you took 20 minutes for that one, so.
It's so funny tonight.
681 is student records. It's also one of the parent rights. This policy is updated to include parental rights related to educational records and the newly amended parental rights in education law, Iowa Code 3026.
I didn't have any problem with this one.
Motion?
Yes, please.
Motion to accept policy number 671, our first read.
681.
Oh, 681, that's it.
I'll second.
All in favor, Kirsty?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Kim?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
See how neat that was?
Yeah. Let's keep going. We're on a roll.
481.
41 was updated with advice from the award-winning communications director. The intent of our updates were to make things a little bit more current, as well as specify the 3 social media platforms that are allowed. And with that, indirectly making it very clear that TikTok is not one of those as a state agency. But the 3 social media platforms that are allowed, the Facebook, oh my gosh, this is running mess up, so I don't know if this is what they're doing. Instagram, and X, which formerly known as, are the 3 that are allowed. And then there was just like networking and media.
So I did just notice here that the numbering might be fixed. It looks like, unless it's been fixed after my version here, but 5 is completely struck out, and I think 9 is completely struck out.
So you need to move the numbers up.
So,
I think it will do that after the track changes are turned off.
and that's fine, as long as.
But we'll make sure of it, yeah.
I didn't have a problem with this one either. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. So I'll make a motion that we adopt 481, social media conduct and employees as written.
Second?
Yeah, I'll second.
I do want to make note that this is very important to get fixed because in my ISBA executive board meeting this past weekend, one of the things that we hear is a report from the Professional Standards Committee. And this singular subject is what is causing people to lose their licenses. So the direction is very good.
You're talking about teachers and their certification.
Yes.
Do we need to consider moving this to a higher priority as far as adopting it next time?
The restraint exclusion.
Instead of waiting? No.
Oh, yeah, we could. I mean, we have had we were one of the first school districts to have a policy in place, so.
I think we should consider
Yeah.
moving that up the
Sure.
list, probably. So,
That's a great idea, Russ.
Do we have to have a proposal for that? No,
Mhm.
just,
I think you just put it
Gotcha.
on the agenda next time.
I'm learning.
Okay. So I go first and second. All in favor, Kirsty?
Aye.
Russ?
Aye.
Kim?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Wait, you got that, we're gonna put that on second reading, correct, Ian?
Yeah. Okay.
All right, 553, restraint from seclusion.
I did have a question about this one.
Do you want me to do my little?
Oh, go ahead.
Give this-
Do your spiel
No,
first.
that's-
I don't mean to stop you.
No, I get my one. The legislature amended Idaho Code 33-12-24, requirements related to use of restraint and seclusion, definitions, requirement for staff training, and specifies the circumstances under which restraint and seclusion may be used. It also included that provision, which you guys did in third read, with an update on corporal punishment, which we deleted policy 547. Already.
Can I just say, this is just a little bit of information. When I first started teaching in 1980, there was corporal punishment. It is funny how far it has come. I mean, just a swing in the whole thing. So that was a long time ago here in Idaho. I did have a question about, and I'm trying to find it. It said that a student would not be held in restraint or in a timeout room for more than 30 minutes, I believe. Is that by the law?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know that as a teacher, sometimes in some of the TLC programs, some kids were held longer than 30 minutes in that program, depending on what was going on with that child. So I didn't know if it was the law or if it's something that we could take out because it depends on each child. But if it's a law, I guess we'll leave it in.
So there would probably be some other strategies that we would use, like leper walk, or, you know, depending on how escalated the child is.
Okay, that was my question.
I would like to point out, when we were going over this on the Policy Advisory Committee, most of the things that the law was putting in, we already had in our policy.
Yeah.
We were already doing.
So awesome for Kuna School District.
Yeah, and speak of award winning, she's not yet, maybe she will be, but our special ed director is really in the forefront of this.
Yeah.
Did a great job.
Okay, that was my only question.
So I hear a motion?
I'll make a motion that we accept policy 553, restraint and seclusion, as written.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 I don't know who we're calling here, sorry. Just so that we all It's getting late.
All right, policy 242.
This one was a very simple minor amendment to Idaho Code 33501.
And I think it was, the legislature was dealing with a very specific situation here, I think.
Yeah,
But it
I
just closes
did
a
administrative law,
loophole
but-
on it, but,
Yeah, I think, is that one this one or the 246, the next one?
Oh, yeah, remember, I just explained it on this one, it was really the next one, yeah.
This is
Because I
just
do have
a,
questions on that one.
this is just a time,
Yeah.
they just told you what.
just so there isn't any,
Yeah.
so that there's certainty as to what time it is, so. Yeah, I would we accept on first reading, policy 242.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Kim?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right. Do you want me to give history on this one?
Well, I did have some questions about this one. It could be because of the history, so go ahead.
Okay, so
Are we
there-
waiting for Spiel here from you?
Yes. go for it.
Based on the Idaho Code 33502, in reference to a boundary change.
Yeah, so what happened was there was a school district up north that had held their elections, and an individual was elected to their zone. What they hadn't done yet, though, was get their boundary, or their zone boundary changes done from the census yet. And so when they finally did that after the election, that person was zoned out of their zone. And so this law literally is to affect one person in the state of Idaho. This situation will not happen at least for another 8 years until the next census. But that's what this was about. That's why we had to change this, so.
Well, I had a question. Yeah, well, I have another question too. I know in the school district up north that after 90 days of not filling it in, it goes to the commissioners. Is that just state law too?
It's statewide.
Okay, that's what I didn't know if we need to put that in because it's not in there. It says after 90 days, or if we just know that it's state law.
Another important thing to note is that that person had not moved. It wasn't because that person moved and they were now in a new zone. It was because the zone
moved.
boundary had moved.
Yeah, I got that. I just didn't know if if we didn't have someone, if it
So
was
if-
the commissioner, if it needed to be said in that was my question. If it doesn't.
So if one of us moves out of our zone, we don't get to keep our seat just
Yeah,
because we
yeah.
moved.
No, I
Yeah.
get, no,
But
I
you still have
get
to
that.
reside at the
Yeah.
address
No,
you
my-
used at the time of the letter.
Yeah.
My question is, do we need to add, because if after 90 days, the board is unable to appoint a trustee from the zone vacated, the board may appoint a person at large from within the boundaries. Is it just mean about the zone, or does it mean overall?
The end of that paragraph, at 120 days, then it gets referred to the Board of County Commissioners if they can't agree on it.
Yeah, so
Oh, so
after
I
90 days, you
misunderstood.
can pick somebody out of any zone.
Okay, so.
If
gotcha.
nobody applies to be in the zone, and like when you applied, you
Right.
applied to be the trustee, we interviewed several people,
Right.
and we chose you. If no one applies for that position, then we can pick someone from anywhere in the
In the
district.
district. Okay, gotcha. I'm good now. Thank you.
G.
Yes, please.
G was updated.
Wait, we did.
Wait, did we?
We did.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
gotta act.
We need a motion.
See what you did there? Okay, do we have a motion for that one?
I'll make a motion that we accept policy 246, trustee vacancy, as written.
Second,
Yeah, I'll second that.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Motion carries. All right, now, please move on to policy 290.
The only updates for G was the updated legal references and include new law adopted by Idaho legislature in regards to U.S. Supreme Court case from which the new Idaho law had a certain origin. And it's Kennedy versus Burns School District.
Again, I had no problem with this one. So I will say, I make a motion that we accept 290, policy 290, non-discrimination policy, as written.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Policy 605.
There was someone here that still said junior high.
Let us do it.
Gosh, I keep forgetting, I'm sorry, Brian, forgive me.
We are required to have career exploration courses and career pathways for students in 7th and 8th grade. This is new law, House Law 209, which will be codified in Chapter 16, Title 33. We also have to have a parent-approved career pathway plan. Those of you that are kids are old in our district, it used to be the promotion.
Plan for promotion.
And it was a,
7th and 8th grade.
yeah, it was a portfolio.
Yes.
You got to judge them, sometimes they got a little repetitive, but they were still fun, they're kids.
But they met the standards.
So when do they set up the career pathway? 8th grade?
They start, yeah, that's really good. They start exploring.
Our policy was probably a bit behind as well, so we had to update quite a bit here, and then there was an 8th grade state change environment in math, so that's why they were split out by 6, 7, and 8 by
Did
itself.
we not discuss removing the junior high words because we aren't a junior high anymore?
Oh, I know, I just didn't do it.
Okay.
And that was my question. Thank you.
And this needs to be crossed out.
Yeah, there's some other place in here, I can't remember, it said middle school, junior high, and I can't remember where it's at.
Knowing the title for sure.
It was
might be
the
on
title, and
second.
there was one other
Yeah,
place.
it's up here in the heading, so once I correct one of them.
Yeah, but there was some place in the writing too that I can't find it right now, that I saw middle school, junior high, that just needs to be updated.
Really old people still call it junior high.
I make a motion that we accept policies 605, middle school required instruction, with the removal of junior high from the policy. Title. Thank you. And wherever you else you can find it in here. Make sure it's out.
All right,
I'll second that.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Policy 210.
So those of you that do any kind of like sounds at night, you can just record me doing policies and it will put you in place. 210 is maybe feel like a bit like Groundhog's Day. You did an emergency approval of 210, we added, included the statutes of the state, and then you as a board asked us to add U.S. Constitution and federal laws as well, so that's the only change to this one.
In motion, discussion?
I don't know how motions.
Yeah, I moved to approve on first reading policy 210, composition and authority of the board.
I'll second that.
All in favor, any discussion?
It just says that we're abiding by all U.S. Constitution and federal laws.
Yes, that's all we're adding. Yep.
Yes, I accept.
Okay.
Aye.
And I?
Aye, motion carries.
It's good lighting.
All right, 212.
When working with our lawyer, this is where it gets a little confusing at times. Sometimes our numbers don't match and our titles don't match. This one got a little bit harder, but her recommendations were 215. Ours is 212. We kept it 212. We changed the title. We renamed this policy to more closely follow the language set forth in Idaho law. The intent was to avoid duplications, revise the powers and duties list to include general categories rather than the specific powers and duties set forth in particular sections of the Idaho law. It's not just, and just real fast, I know there was a bit of social media question on why we were getting rid of Veterans Day and all American flags. Policy 354, school holidays, spells out exactly what the Veterans Day requirements are. Also policy 6, which also in Idaho code 33512 and 3311606. Policy 641, citizenship, U.S. Constitution, national flags and colors, gives us like exact flag requirements that we have to follow as well as IDAPA and Idaho code 31602.
So we're just changing this and it's aligning with other policies that we already have.
You're just not duplicating,
Right, we're just-
and then speaking more in general terms, and specifically your job is to make sure we have a Veterans Day.
And I want to say that Kuna High School has the best Veterans Day program ever. If you ever get a chance to go, which I'm going to this year.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever hear a rumor that we got rid of Veterans Day.
I know, I was surprised at that rumor.
Not only does the high school do it, but so do the middle schools, so.
Yeah.
And all schools are required to at least have one class period of instruction about Veterans Day. Once again, that's Idaho code 33512 and Idaho code 336.
Okay, so do we have a motion? We can make the motion and then discuss if we need to.
I'll make the motion that we accept policy 212, powers and duties of the board.
Is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye, motion carries. All right, thank you.
See you in October.
I just can I say something? I would like to thank Trustee Johnson and Trustee Thomas for all the work that they're doing on this and for the whole committee, because it is a lot of work and I appreciate it. So thank you for your time.
Superintendent Johnson, would you like to talk to us
Yeah.
about policy 215?
Yeah, and I asked Brian to present this, as you heard, really impassioned testimony, and I appreciate those who have the courage to stand up and talk about this. It's not easy. I have a history with this policy that is before you. In 2018, we started to really put a process internally together to update our policies. And we organized different policies. You know, as you know, policies come to us from a couple of different locations. One is Idaho School Boards Association, and also whatever attorney, you know, we tend to be working with at the time. We changed attorneys in from 2018 to now, and you know, different interpretations often can happen. So we've had over the years various complaints about pride flag being up in a classroom, for example. And we had an attorney that said, okay, no flags, or everybody can get a flag. You can't discriminate. And then we since then have had an attorney that said, wait a minute, what are you doing here? You have all your clubs put together. And the testimony that was shared with you today during delegations about the importance of kids being involved in activities is 100% accurate. We know that not only will children be less likely to harm themselves, but they're also less likely to commit violence on a school campus when they're involved and engaged in activities at school. When they have a person at school that's a friend, when they have a person that's an advocate. In our attempt to make sure, and it was one of our goals of our past strategic plan, that every child would be involved in an extracurricular activity. And in the attempt to make sure that happened, we put all of our clubs together in one kind of framework. But the Equal Access Act says we can't do that. What we need to differentiate is those clubs that are in the act, it says curricular, and those that are non-curricular. An easier way for me to think about this is those clubs and activities that are school-sponsored and those that are not school-sponsored. The act states that we cannot discriminate against a group that wants to meet during non-instructional time. So we're working, and we started this work, this particular policy, we were working on, we had just changed attorneys, and we were working on updating kind of the student activities section of our policies. And it was slated to come before you, I believe it was April in my notes, and Chairman Grant actually brought it up to me because we had had a discussion about it. And in April of 2020, we were in described chaos because we were all trying to provide online learning with, the situation with COVID. So we moved on into policies that were around masks. We moved on to policies that were about online learning, about modifying graduation requirements, and in that process, we never came back to it. So I appreciate Chairman Grant for bringing it up. He's like, weren't we talking about this? And so I went back to that folder and said, yes, it was slated for the April meeting. So the purpose of this policy is to delineate which clubs are school-sponsored and which are not. And there was a past attorney's opinion around flags in particular that said we can't either have the U.S. and the Idaho flag, nothing else. And this allows us to have other types of organizations represented. So like I know the FFA talks about their emblem, for example, what the pieces and parts are. That's a curricular-based club. So what this policy does is it says that any sort of emblem, flag, can only happen during non-instructional time for non-school sponsored activities. The GSA club was mentioned tonight. So before school, during lunch, after school, the flag could be up during club time. Just like I think we had the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, another non-school sponsored activity. When they had club day, they had their flag at lunch. So instead of restricting, which is one of the options you see in your policy, some school districts said no. Every club and activity has to be, and it's an option in the policy. They all have to be school sponsored in order to have any sort of time at school. And we, because we know the research, we said no, we don't want to restrict that by saying that clubs that are not school sponsored can't meet at school. We said we want that, and our practice has shown that. But because they are not school-sponsored. There are limits by law to what we can put in place before school, at lunch, after school. So the club, FCA clubs, we have a role-playing club at the high school. There's the lacrosse club. It's a non-school sponsored club because it's not a sanctioned activity through IHSA, for example. So what I have developed, which we'll be updating depending on your direction tonight, is to differentiate between school-sponsored and non-school sponsored so that everybody's clear who is in charge. And you heard our advisor tonight talk about the students run this club. I'm there to make sure there's treats and safeties in place and that sort of thing. And a school-sponsored club, so non-school, school-sponsored. We are asking that you consider it because we need to clarify this. We're asking that you adopt it today. At least consider the adoption as if it were a third reading because it was scheduled to be updated multiple years ago to address some of the concerns that have been expressed by public members. And I guess I would stand for any other questions. I hope I've explained it. And I have a document that kind of gets into less legalese, like that's on your policy.
So I think to more closely align it with what the 20 USC section 407.1 and the sections following that, I would have suggest some slight changes or make a motion to make some slight changes. And on page 2, paragraph 6, I move to to just strike everything after it says the presence of a faculty sponsor or member prior to every meeting, and then strike that next sentence that says clubs will be allowed to meet on school premises during other times of the day, only in extraordinary or exceptional circumstances as may be determined by the principal delegates or designee. I don't think that's in the statute. I think that's so that's one thing, and then paragraph 9, I just propose that we strike after meetings, club meetings and activities, put a period there, and strike unless otherwise approved by the principal or designee for the same reason. That I don't think that's in there. And then the last one will be on page 4. There's paragraph number 8 there, and it would be the same situation. We'll put a period after only during approved meetings and activities, and strike unless otherwise approved by the principal or designee. So I make a motion that we approve it and adopt it on an emergency basis with those proposed changes and those amendments.
I accept it. So you're seconding it? What? Are you seconding it?
Yes, I am seconding the motion.
Okay. I just wanted to make a comment that I feel like because this is such an important policy and subject matter for the community and most importantly the people in this room this evening, I feel like it's very pertinent and important to accept this as the third reading. So, any other discussion?
Question.
Yes.
Paragraph 6. What is it that you want
Page.
to have? Page 2.
Page 2, paragraph 6. Towards the bottom of that page, where it says students shall be responsible for ensuring the presence of a faculty sponsor or monitor prior to every meeting. Just put a period there.
Yeah. Okay.
And then strike
The clubs will be out.
the remainder of that.
Okay.
In that paragraph.
Okay.
All right. All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Policy has been accepted and enacted. Thank you. We are now at the good of the order.
monies that can be given to teachers and educators in our school district. We have a pending fundraiser where you can go online and order tickets to the BSU game on this Saturday. And part of that money will go to our Kuna Education Foundation to help us with money. So I just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. And I believe that went out through which one? Went out through Peach Jar today. So I just want you to know where that money is going to. So it's kind of a nice thing if you want to go to the BSU game and raise money for our foundation.
We have good of the order, the Kuna School District Homecoming Week is this week. And we are now on, Tuesday's done, so Wednesday, tomorrow is a bonfire at Farmstead.
Yes, there is.
Then Thursday, there's the girls' soccer game. Friday, there's the football, the First Responders and Military Appreciation Night. I also want to add in on Friday morning at 8:50 to 9:50 is my favorite assembly ever, so I'm going to that. But you're welcome to come. It's a very fun assembly. And then Saturday is the parade from 10 to 11. Don't miss that. Always a good time. And then the Caveman Carnival and Car Show from 11 to 2 and at the KHS parking lot.
And JV plays Thursday as well.
Oh, okay. The JV, is it also a home game?
No, it's not.
Oh,
You have to travel. That's okay, we're good travelers.
And then for the trustees, don't forget that the ISBA convention is coming up in November. It is in Boise, so please plan to attend at least
You need to know.
a big chunk
Yeah.
if you're going to.
I am
I'll
attending.
be there for the whole thing. Yeah. It's a great time for us to get training and to network with other board members from across the state and learn how they're doing things in their district. So this year and next year we'll be in Boise, and then good news, we get to go back to Coeur d'Alene the year after, so yay. But do plan to come to a good chunk of convention. It's gonna be fantastic. This year, I've heard in the past, and they've heard and they responded, well, what does that workshop have to do with a board and being a good board member? And so they have cleaned that up, and everything you go to will be directed at being a good board member, so it's gonna be a good time. So one other thing, one other real quick thing, if you have as a theme for the auction, for the scholarship auction, is the great outdoors. So if you have anything that you want to donate for the auction, that would be fantastic. And that's all I have to say. We have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor? Kirsty, would you like to adjourn?
Yes.
Aye. Thank you.